I was in the Air Force, and everyone knows in the Air Force, a fighter pilot has to say, there I was at 30,000 feet in a left-hand turn, and I killed a guy, right? That is not me, but I was 10,000 feet below that guy on September 11th, 2001. I was on the phone with the National Military Command Center. We were talking about New York City, and the guy on the other end of the phone said, our fire alarms just went off. And I turned around, looked at the television in the conference room, and the traffic cameras were on. This was rush hour. The helicopters were up, and they caught it, and got a picture very similar to that. The interesting story, so I was the guy who actually reported to the National Military Command Center that they were under attack. And it was real time. It was instant. We were fortunate. We had a helicopter up. The traffic cameras were up, so we could see it. But the story here is to have a plan. We had, as you know, the military is very planning intensive. We have plans for everything. This is 2001. This is after the Cold War had been over almost 9 years. And quite frankly, we were complacent. We had plans in effect. The contingency plan for my organization was the Defense Information Systems Agency. We provided the internet connectivity, all the technology services for the Defense Department. After 9/11, I was given the responsibility to develop our contingency plans. They were written in 1994. They had never been tested. I went to the recovery facility. There was a 1/4 inch of dust on the desks. There was not one computer in the room. And we were the Defense Information Systems Agency. Pretty embarrassing. So have a plan in effect is very important. The interesting story about this picture of the fire is the nose of American 77 came to a rest 30 feet from a server room in the Pentagon. There are several, as you can imagine, 26,000 people work in the Pentagon. There are several of these server rooms. Each of the servers has an uninterrupted power supply. If you have a server and you don't have an UPS, get one, okay? And they were rated to last for 24 hours because they figured by then the generators would be up, replacement systems would be in place. We could go 24 hours. 72 hours later, we were able to get to that computer room. The UPS was still running, which was amazing. So we were lucky that day. So there's a lot of statistics out there on disaster recovery, and I just want to point some facts out. Okay, 60% of businesses in Mississippi closed after the hurricanes in 2005. 70% of companies go out of business within a year of suffering from a natural disaster. And 93% of businesses go bankrupt after losing access to their data for 10 days. So pretty scary numbers. That's a pretty high probability of kill, 93%. And where do I point this? So what I want to talk about are 3 deadliest mistakes we see from a disaster recovery planning standpoint, from technological standpoint, and what are some options for mitigating. Because it's really not just about backing up your data. It's about recovering your business, and that needs to be the focus. It's recovering your business, and data backup is merely a part of that. Some of the mistakes that we see is we have an inadequate backup strategy in place in small businesses. The backups are too infrequent. They're not managed or scheduled. They're not encrypted. They're not secured. We often go to the lowest price bidder on these kinds of things, and you get what you pay for. They are not at multiple locations. We try to talk about a 3-2-1 rule. You should have 3 copies of your data located at in 2 locations, backed up a minimum of once a day. We actually recommend more than once a day. The next mistake we see is that there is no data recovery plan in place. These don't have to be very difficult plans to write, with 12 annexes and 150 pages. 2 to 3 pages. Where is my data? What are the passwords that I need to know? Who has access to the data? How do I recover it? What's the 800 number or the local tech support number to get some assistance? Those kinds of things. And if you are in an industry that is regulated by the financial industry or healthcare industry, this is a requirement for you, okay? Next is a part of the a disaster recovery plan is a part of your business continuity plan, and Peter talked about that, so I'm going to really not hit on that too much. I wonder if the battery's going out. So we often focus on these things, on natural disasters, okay? They grab our attention. They are in the headlines, and Brian's going to be talking about them on the news tonight, right? And 20% of small businesses will suffer from one of these on average every 5 years, or you have a 20% chance in 5 years. We have certainly seen that here in this community. However, there we go. However, if you look at the chart on the left, I know there's kind of a lot of data here. Down at the bottom, 5% of data disasters are a result of those things, of natural disasters. The largest is a hardware failure, 55%. It's a hard drive that dies. It's a server that dies, okay? 55% of all disasters. 22% are human error. What that means is I saved the file incorrectly. I corrupted the file. It was something we did with the database. Oops. And you know, that always happens, you know, at the worst possible time, right? 18% is because of a software failure, okay? And this is where malware and viruses come into play. Malware is a software program that hides on your computer and sucks data out, manipulates your computer for somebody else to have access to it, okay? And so 18%. So when we look at natural disasters, that gets our attention, but that's not the only reason you should have a disaster recovery plan in effect, is some big disaster. You should have a disaster recovery plan in effect to handle that hard drive failure, okay? On the right side of the screen, it looks like a lot of money. This was a study done by an international trade association in the computer business, CompTIA, and they analyzed businesses that were 500 employees and less. So it's a pretty broad definition of a small business. And they say for those companies, it can cost up to $8,500 an hour. For you, if you were down, just do the math. How many employees do I have? What do they cost me per hour? And if I am down, how much is that costing me per hour? Okay? On the top there, it talks about how many events on average occur. And again, realizing that some of these are those hardware failures, about twice a year you can expect something to happen where you don't access your data. It'll take you about 2 hours of downtime and then up to 5 hours of recovery time. That's recovering that database that we corrupted. Okay? So we do the math, and that can cost a small business of 10 employees. If the average cost per employee is $15 an hour, that's $1,000. Okay? So not necessarily in our budget. So what are some solutions? Along the top, we talk about the cloud, kind of the upper left. There are a lot of solutions out there. The cloud is a very good solution set for disaster recovery, okay, and data backup. And there are a lot of choices when it comes to the cloud and a lot of things to think about, okay. Next, we have resident servers called network attached storage devices, and they are in your location. And so you're backing up your server and all your computers onto this NAS device, network attached storage device, and it's done perhaps on a regular basis, every 15 minutes, every hour, whatever. But it's in your location, okay? So if the water main does break and floods your server room, you still got a problem. Next, we see in really small businesses of 5 employees or less, we see people using external drives. This is a very small network attached storage device. It's only got one drive, and so if that drive fails, guess what? All your data is failed. We do see people with their strategy is they put everything on a thumb drive. Okay. The funny thing is I always like to have a backup plan when I give talks like this. So I'm running around this morning and I said to my wife, "Where's my thumb drive? Because I need to put this PowerPoint on here in case they didn't get it." And of course I couldn't find my thumb drive, right? Next are the tried and true tapes. Okay, we do see some people who have tapes and they don't use them. Tapes are very fraught with problems in recovery. They take a long time to recover, and they're kind of a pain. So most people are moving to some of the other sources like the cloud at this point. The other solution is they take that external drive, thumb drive, or tape and put it into a firebox. How hot does the inside of a firebox get? And so you have a tape that's made out of plastic, and it's 400 degrees raging around that firebox. Your tapes are melting. And then the last choice that I like is the trunk. And we have actually had people tell me they do this. Every night, I take my external drive and I put it in my car. And so we said, "Well, so when's the last time you did that?" "Well, I do it every night." And it was like every night 9 months ago. They forgot, one thing came to the other, not a very solid solution, okay? But we do see that. So let's talk a little bit more about the cloud. And there's a lot of confusion. It's kind of a buzzword, okay? What is the cloud? And the cloud, they describe the cloud as in three kind of sets of services. These are data centers that are spread throughout the world. They're huge data centers. Big server farms, storage devices. Microsoft, for example, they have 16 data centers around the world. Each data center has 16 buildings in them. I don't know why they like 16, but anyway. And each building is the size of a football field. Okay, so they're huge. They're in everywhere from Beijing, yes, to Redmond, Washington. Okay, they're all over the world. But what they're often used for are infrastructure services. This is where data backup comes into play. Storage, off-site storage is another kind of infrastructure. And then there are some security services that you can use. So, big name brand kinds of things you might see. Google, okay? Microsoft Azure, Carbonite, those kinds of things. Those are infrastructure kinds of services. Then you can have platforms. Okay, platforms is when I take the server or the computer out of my computer processing out of my office and I move it up to Redmond, Washington. Okay? And then finally is software. Perfect example of a software application is Office 365 or QuickBooks Cloud. Okay? So we aren't processing any computer functions on our computer here locally. That's all being done elsewhere. Okay? And we're just merely connecting to that server. From a disaster recovery standpoint, each of these has a play, or can have a play in your small business. If your data, if you are storing, for example, you're using Office 365, you can store your data in the Microsoft Cloud, okay, at those 16 data centers throughout the world. What's good about that is if the floods come and they take your building down, your data is still available. You just have to go to a different computer to access it.
Do they store the image too?
In a backup solution, yes, you can do that. There's two different kinds of backups, actually several different kinds, 3 different kinds that I can think of, but one is a file and folder where I'm just replicating those files up to the cloud. The other is an image, and that can be kind of broken into 2 categories. One is what's called a bare metal restore, and that's where they ship you a disk 24 hours later, and you can restore that server. And the third is what's called virtualization. So very quickly, usually within 30 minutes, they are spinning up a server for you in the cloud, and you are accessing that. Obviously, the price goes up as you go up in those 3 areas. Okay. So, disaster recovery in the cloud, again, we recommend a 3-2-1 approach. So using local and using cloud is our approach. The strengths of using that is you do have off-site storage of your data, okay? The challenge with that can be if you have lots of data that you're trying to recover and you are limited on your internet speeds, it will take you a long time to recover. That's where a local recovery device like a NAS device is great. The other challenges that you have to look at is from a security standpoint. If it's free, it is not encrypted. Okay, so your data is available to anyone who can surf Google if they know what they're doing, if they, know Charles or whatever. Okay. Yes. If they know Charles' skill sets, I should say, and they're not ethical. The other thing that you need to consider is recovery assistance. If you have one of those natural disasters, your focus as a business owner should be recovering your entire business, accounting for your people, taking care of your people, connecting with your clients. Who is going to help you recover your data? That's something you might want to consider. If it's not a lot of data, it's probably something you can do yourself. If you need it very quickly, it's something you may want to consider having someone help you with. And often in the cloud, it's a pay-as-you-go. So they will charge you by the amount of data that you are storing up, and they will also charge you by the amount of data that you pull down. So if you have a lot of data, it can be costly. Okay. So biggest questions that I hear on the cloud, is it secure? And the answer is it depends. Okay. It depends on whether you're using free services. Okay, if you're using Gmail or Yahoo for your business mail, and it has all your contacts in there, and that's what people want, okay, that is not encrypted. That is actually, if you read your service agreement, is the property of Google. Okay, so if it's free, it's sometimes very expensive from a security standpoint. The other question that people ask me is, where's my data? And again, that depends on what services that you use. For example, with Microsoft Azure, which is a big cloud computing capability that they have, you as a small business can designate, I want my data in these data centers. I want my data in the United States. If you're in the defense industry, that is a requirement. If you're in the financial industry, it's also a requirement. So something else to consider when evaluating cloud service providers. Okay, so my get off the stage comments. Have a strategy in place and make that a part of your business continuity plan. Write it, okay? It's all about the planning, it's not about the plan. And test it. It's all about executing, right? And practicing that, as Peter was talking about. What you need to focus on is the end game, as Franklin Covey used to say. What was his name? David Covey? Whatever. Stephen Covey, there you go. Focus on the end game, focus on the recovery. How quickly can I go without my information? How quickly can I go without, servicing my customers? And then build your strategy around that. And then follow a 3-2-1 rule is our recommendation. Because in the end, we don't want you to be a part of that 93%.